We seek the authentic over the authoritarian. We see behind the curtain, the theatrics, the theoi tricks, the tricks of the gods, becoming aware of the artifice used by those who would rule us. As our eyes become opened, we cultivate the knowing, that inner gateway to all that is, the infinite mindscape where the patterns that create manifest reality exists. The gatekeepers held sway for so long, defining reality for those who listen. But now the rush of the crowd comes as each knows the way is open to all who thirst for knowledge and wisdom. The gatekeeper who stands in the way will be trampled, for nothing can stop those whose time has come. The portals of knowing are opening. Beware to the gatekeepers who will not give way. This is the Portals of Knowing podcast, brought to you by portalsofknowing.com. We are Karen Christine Patrick and Bret Sheppard, independent researchers in the area of the experiencer movement, exopolitics, UFOs, anomalies, and alternative history. Welcome. Hello, this is Karen Christine Patrick. Welcome to the second episode of the Portals of Knowing podcast. What are the portals of knowing? That's going to be my topic for today. Kind of introducing who we are, what we're doing, all of that. The portals of knowing comes from a download. Some of you who have that experience of suddenly having something pop into your brain that's profound and you don't exactly know where it came from. You hope it came from your own higher mind, higher thinking, but maybe have a suspicion it comes from somewhere else other than your own thinking. That's an experience I have. I've had it ever since I was a child, just something popping into my head. I always consider like an external hard drive or something that I was getting to read information off of. I have these occasions, usually when I'm thinking about a particular topic very intensely. I'm trying to figure something out. And I have a flash of insight, and for me it comes in kind of a proverb format. And that was the case here, as this was actually coming to me just before I was waking up one morning, where I get my best stuff, and write it down if I happen to be on the ball, because I'm too groggy sometimes to remember what those gems are. But this one came this way: the portals of knowing are opening. Beware to the gatekeeper who will not give way. If that sounds familiar, it's in my intro of the program. And it was having to do with a lot of thinking that I was engaged in about information systems. I actually have almost a degree in that. I studied computer science in the earliest days of computers, going from being big giant things in a room somewhere that you typed into a terminal to access, to being something that was on your desktop, to being something in your pocket that's connected to a group of big giant computers in a room somewhere. I've been very interested in information systems. It has to do with the idea that as a result of technology allowing us to access so much, and we have the world in our pocket nearly, it goes to the heart of information, looking at information in its natural habitat. That's what we get to do now with the cloud through our devices. It goes to an older idea coming from Gnosticism, the knowingness. It means to know, or of the knowing, or of knowing. An ancient tradition that was your ancient world navel gazer type, that were saying everything we need to know is within us. We have access to all knowledge within. A very deep, profound spiritual principle that many religions and spiritual faith traditions draw from. before we had book printing and Gutenberg, who invented movable type, which made it possible just to have a book, and then the ability to read was not always something that was granted to you. Having access to a library with certain information was limited to people who controlled knowledge of medical science or other things, historical records. We're having a modern day Alexandria, right? In spite of a lot of people not knowing how to read, not knowing how to read in the right language, not having access to things in the first place, we're having a reversal of that with technology. Technology is making it available to anyone who bothers to look at it. And so that's what the knowing kind of is speaking to, is the ability to know. And knowing isn't just like reading it or knowing it in your head. Knowing in the deeper sense means knowing in your heart, or know it by heart, or to live it out, right? It's not enough to just know something. If you don't apply those principles, you don't use those principles, if they're not practical as far as you're trying to apply it to a particular problem, you can have book learning of a topic and not have empirical knowledge about it, hands-on learning. There's a lot to that statement. The portals of knowing are opening. So it's not just we're getting access because we have technology, although it's interesting because recently I had my car repaired and I have an alternator in my car that's in a sort of an unusual spot in a car, I was amused to find out that my mechanic and his guys helping him actually went on YouTube to watch a YouTube video of how to change an alternator in my particular model of car, and as a result of watching the YouTube, they were able to change the alternator. So that was an interesting application of applied knowledge. Obviously these guys knew, they were knowledgeable, they had hands-on learning, but that particular thing, they needed a little bit of somebody else's experience put into some kind of readable format. I was able to drive my car away, right? So that's an interesting way of knowing too, is that you've already learned all what you need to know to be able to do it, and then you get the information on how to specifically do the thing that you need to do. So it's a very interesting time to be alive. I personally love it. I love technology for that exact reason, is that you can actually find out how to do something. I'm an artist and a crafter. I can find out how to do a particular type of art form, or how to use a particular medium, or do a particular thing. Plus I can just find out something just to satisfy curiosity. I love to look up movie locations. That's probably one of my favorite things about watching a movie, is trying to guess where did they make it. And so I go online and I find out where it was made. They always have one place substitute for another place, so it's kind of interesting to see who actually thought that New Zealand was Middle Earth. Who knew, right? Or you can't remember the name of somebody, and we can settle those arguments. Or, who did actually first invent the radio, So I think information is fun and interesting. I find it very entertaining. And we have that ability to know it. We can get just more information. I might have learned from my friends and my family what to view on a particular topic, and then get new information. I talk to somebody who's had that experience and find out there's a lot of mythology about what it's like to be a disabled person or to be an astronaut, and to actually have a chance to go and ask that person. Social media is amazing. You can actually, if they're not dead, you can actually ask a person directly, what did you mean by that in that book? Or what do you think about things based on your perspective? So the access to each other is very interesting, what technology is able to do. And I think it's going to change the decision making and planning considerably to be crowdsourcing. Not everyone knows what that is. Maybe they're more familiar with its auxiliary crowdfunding, but crowdsourcing came from the world of technology. You have a lot of people looking at the code with many eyeballs. There's going to be somebody who's figure out what the issue is and be able to help debug it, as opposed to one poor lone guy in a room somewhere reading thousands of lines of code. You have thousands of people reading all those thousands of lines of code, and then as a result, ideas for solutions and debugging becomes easier. So we're beginning to have crowdsourcing in other decision-making areas, which is probably not comfortable to people who like a lot of power, but it is better democratically for all of us to be contributing to governance, be contributing to how are we collectively going to handle a problem. The portals, I keep talking about it often on what are portals. Well, it's a way in or a way through. It's a pass-through, and that could be anything. It can be a book, is a portal. If I was reading a book about China, my book would be a portal into looking into what is China like. without having to necessarily go if I wasn't able to. If I have the portal of experience, to actually go to China, and I get to look around and see it and experience, that's a portal. You are my portal to that experience. As you tell your story about whatever happened to you, portals of knowing is that we've got this opening up, generally speaking, of almost everything is becoming more accessible. And that's better in the sense that we don't need to feel overwhelmed with information, because we just need to know what we need to know, right? Or we need to know what we want to know. I don't need to know everything there is about my car to be able to drive it. And I'm really grateful for people who do know all about my car to fix it for me so I can drive it. So that's what the Portals of Knowing concept is, and how it played out to portalsofknowing.com is that full statement. The portals of knowing are opening. Beware to the gatekeepers who won't give way. Woo, there you go. We've had gatekeepers on an awful lot of information, which was somewhat understandable if you had limited knowledge. If knowledge had to be in big books and had to be in a library somewhere, and you had to protect that library and guard that library. And we certainly know what happens if you don't protect a library. When we think about the Library of Alexandria, we know that it burnt, but when it burnt and who burnt it and all that's got some debate to it when you actually look into it. But we're realizing as we got all the remaining ancient texts that we know were in the Library of Alexandria, but we actually don't have those written texts anymore, because we only know about that they even existed because somebody else referenced them. We have a guy and he's writing a particular treatise on medicine or something, and he says, this guy from that place wrote this. So we know that one statement that author would mention based on that earlier work. And we might have fragments of that earlier work, or we merely might only have the mention. And it might be a situation where that's the only time that writer and that particular book was written. It might have been a book by some author that's written other works that we still have a piece of, or it might be everything that author wrote about is gone. Or it's gone for a while and then it gets found somewhere else. So knowledge has been limited as far as like written and recorded knowledge. So the portals of knowing are opening. Beware to the gatekeepers that will not give way. Gatekeepers are not necessarily bad. They're needful as far as we can't just let anybody into any library. They might strike a match and there you go, right? Or we might want to protect the works themselves. Any given book or scroll or something like it does have a delicacy to it over time, unless it's republished. But gatekeepers can serve a purpose, like the librarian at the library, as far as keeping everything safe and helping with accessibility. But there's a time when a gatekeeper knows to get out of the way of the information. Most of us would feel that it wasn't right for someone to limit that knowledge if somebody else needed it. If somebody else really needed to know that thing and it was important, then the librarian would not be trying to hide it, would be trying to help them find it, which is something librarians do. When it's time for someone to know them and they won't get out of the way, it's almost like they've broken a sacred trust with the knowledge itself. Now, I know certain reasons why you probably wouldn't want someone to know a particular thing. You probably wouldn't want someone to know how to build a bomb. That's always a controversial one, unless you know what they're going to do with it. There's information that's controversial. The exact particular place you should stab someone to kill them. Might be some responsibility in either giving out the knowledge. Why do you want to know that? Or responsibility of the person when they receive the knowledge, what they do with it. As we have this grand opening of the grand library of human knowledge through technology, we would generally see the opening up of all knowledge to everybody as a positive thing, in the sense of when we had the Renaissance time being a result of the fact that all this knowledge stored up in libraries with just one or two copies was then translated into books, and then the books through movable type. And so we're repeating a process here. So we had knowledge being in individual privatized libraries, and then we had the invention of the book, or the printing press, to create the book, which made it possible to make inexpensive copies of books available more generally than just to a few people. And we call that time the Renaissance. And it was a great time of opening up of knowledge, and with cross-pollination of ideas and knowledge, we had a great technological and societal upheaval toward amazing progress. we would consider having let's say if the internet shut down tomorrow, be a scramble for us to figure out how to do things. We generally think of that very negatively. And yet some people think of applied technology to information almost exclusively negatively. I'm not sure that I agree with it, although I know there's some possible negative aspects as well. But generally speaking, with an expansion of knowledge comes the ability to apply it in more creative ways and to improve the lot of all of us together, generally. There's a lot of debate of a lot of those points. I'm having that debate in my mind as I'm even speaking, but yeah, generally I think when we go finish the upheaval of what technology, the changes that it's creating, and we balance out some of the negative aspects, for instance, the upheaval of technology towards robotics and how that's displacing jobs. That's an upheaval of interest because of the fact that we're applying technology to human work, and we don't have a balancing principle. We don't have a way to balance out, because of these changes, who's winning, who's losing, who's being left out of the game, which is interesting because even that is being debated amongst circles. So with these changes, we need to come up with sustainable ideas that will allow for the change, will allow the progress to keep happening. It's not progress if we apply technology, robotics, other, automation to human work, and then someone's out of a job and then they're on the street. It's not a positive thing. So we need to have the institutions of society ramp up and be able to keep up with those changes. So it makes for an interesting time. It makes for a lot of debate. But we do need to acknowledge generally that this is in fact taking place and not to be ignorant of the fact. I personally have lived in an era where almost everything that I've done, very few things that I've done didn't be affected by automation. I've had a number of jobs that simply been automated out of existence, and a few that have not yet had applied automation, but with robotics will eventually be replaced. But there's some things that can't be replaced. One of my jobs was being a mother. You can't exactly replace that with a robot. Although you may someday have a robot that minds the kids, you certainly can't give them a child everything it needs through a robot, that's for sure. Nurturing and what we do for each other and art and those types of things can't completely be automated. This is an interesting time to be alive, and generally speaking, that's why I am really wanting to talk about it in the course of a podcast, because I now have gotten along in life and done enough experiences that I've got some perspectives that, as I express them to others, I've been involved in some form of broadcasting or podcasting now since 2012. People find interesting, and they're encouraging me to present my personal perspective more. I love to pass on also what I've learned from other people. That's an irreplaceable thing. A whole human shows up to talk to you about something. Never, ever say that person is just no human being I know is ever just a one thing. They come with a whole planetoid of information of their life experiences that can't be encapsulated in a title. And we need to appreciate each other so much more as portals, because humans are amazing. Every human is amazing in some way or another. And we got something to learn from everybody.
Yes, on this topic of the portals of knowing, that it was a statement that I downloaded, as I said before. Bret and I used it for our combined website, portalsofknowing.com, and we've had a lot of discussions about the concept of portals and the concept of knowing. So I wanted to get Bret's perspective right here about this idea. So what do you think, Bret, when you hear the phrase, the portals of knowing?
Well, the one of the things that I think of or look back on is all the research that we've done with different people, and we've learned from each other. And we've downloaded all kinds of things, from the morphogenic field, and the thing about knowing, just knowing, is about experiences related to this information that's coming in or being downloaded. It's whether it's true or not. Whether it's true or not. And this is partly instinctual and partly experiential, and that these some of these researches into the unknown of our history, and the unknown of the extraterrestrial question, which isn't a question to us at all. Most of us that have experienced these things know the reality of that. And what a lot of people neglect to think about is the communication that's actually happening. And some of these communications that come in are telling a very human story about Earth, and have very human outcomes. And this is not what's being put out there in the multimedia, the mainstream media. And it's hardly being put out there in the alternative media, because they're trying to copy off of the mainstream media for some kind of formatting or something. So the knowing is all of the collective ideas and downloads and experiences that have come to people that make them know about something, regardless of whether that's about the true history of religion or the true history of humanity. These are things that are in question, and I believe that could really help humanity out today. And these are some of the things that we just know. And it's partially, about common sense. It's partially about just, like I said, using your experiences as a source of information, rather than getting your source of information somewhere else and not checking whether or not that's factual or whatnot, or what that means to you. There's a lot of ideas out there that are not quite factual, but they trigger the knowing inside of you, that says whether something about that is true or not, whether there's truth in the myth, so to speak. So this is the tool of the knowing, and I'll give it back to Karen.
Well, yeah, you were kind of alluding to my next question, which is, so much of the time we're asked to believe a validation of somebody else's experience rather than our own. And why do you think that might be the case?
If we have all we have as a source is someone else's experience, that's okay. As long as something's checking out about that. If it's something that you absolutely can't prove or something like that, there is ways of using the knowing as a tool to discern the information that's coming to you. And one of those things that we should never forget is to maybe listen to someone else's human experience, because I find that more validating than anything out there that would debunk something.
In other words, it's more valid than a contrived story that is kind of crafted for maybe like a hierarchical purpose. In other words, when you hear somebody else's human story, your knowing towards that is wherever you resonate, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Does it correlate with some of the experiences that you had? I'm sure they're different. But, do they correlate with some of your experiences that are, to you, a fact of knowing? And you can kind of tell, when somebody's talking about their human experience, and they're very passionate about it. They're serious about it. It's not funny to them. These are some of the things to look for, when you're communicating an idea or talking to someone about a topic that is a bit esoteric or occult, the occult word meaning hidden, from the public.
One of the things that you and I have engaged recently in the last couple of years is whistleblower testimony, and then watching a debunking process. And what's fascinating to me about the debunking process is it makes a demand for evidence and credibility without itself investigating and presenting evidence and credibility. And I was just wanting to know if you wanted to speak to that too.
Well, debunkers, people that are doubting Thomases, so to speak, and they hear someone's story and they immediately say, well, that's bull, or that doesn't really exist, or something like that. They're using a different set of tools and a different mindset that are rooted back into the false memory syndrome hypothesis or theory. And it is just a theory, just like the Darwinian theories or anything else. Now, the thing is about this false memory thing is I don't believe that there are any. I don't believe that there are any false memories. I only believe that there may be faulty memories associated with specific details.
Distortion.
Yeah, distortion. So the debunkers will use these distortions of specific details to say that your story is not true, when it is true. It's just that you choose to communicate it a certain way, a different idea.
One of the things that we track on quite a bit, because we're both experiencers with that definition, meaning people who've had, let's say, paranormal experiences that, well, I don't like the word paranormal, because what is normal? What is in the range of normal human experiences? People can have extreme experiences and it be still within the range of what is possible for a human to experience. I have a difficulty, like, it's not normal. Paranormal would be like, it's not normal, or not possible in some people's minds. As experiencers, specifically of contact, because we're getting ready to talk about that at a seminar. We're getting ready to do a seminar in Silver City, New Mexico, called Cosmic Communication, and both of us are experiencers of cosmic communication. Myself with more like downloading of messages, and yours of visions and pictures and graphic communication. As experiencers, we talk amongst ourselves, and we're going to tell each other our truth, but we're presented with even a paranormal genre, debunking disbelief attitude, and a defining of our experiences. And what we've had to do for ourselves is to center within our own experiences. In other words, it's not my job to make people believe what I have to say. I don't really have the capacity to convince them. They either relate or they don't relate. So we've centered in our own experiences, and then when we're able to hear somebody else, we can kind of start to tell, are they centered in their own experiences, or they just want to have an opinion about everybody else's experiences. So, talking to experiencers who maybe are a little more shy than we are, what would you want to say to them to encourage them?
Well, what I would mainly like to say is that you're the expert of your experience. Don't let someone else tell you what you've experienced. That would be the main thing. And as far as the experience itself, what message does it have? How important is it to actually get that out in the public? So, does it help humanity? What's the actual message behind all that? Because, just saying that, yes, I saw it, I saw the UFO, or yes, I saw the alien, that doesn't mean really anything. It really doesn't. What is the message behind that? We already know that they exist. We already know that they're hiding them. But why? So, the main thing is, what is the message? What is the communication that you actually have with that ship or with that UFO or with that ET out there? What are they saying to you that is so important that it needs to get out into humanity? And why you? So these are all kinds of questions that people should ask themselves. Why did they come to you? And I'll bet you it has something to do with the timeline that you are specifically on. So there's a point in time and an opportunity to actually say whatever it is that message was to the rest of the public. And, there's these certain circumstances, where you're bombarded, with all of these mainstream ideas or socio-economic ideas and political ideas and religious ideas to try and conform what your experience is. So that you have all of this so-called normal against what you've seen. This is something that disrupts the status quo, or the consensus type reality that people have or they think they have. So it's very disturbing. What they have is a manufactured reality. They're taught from very early on to step into line and don't do this and do this and whatever. So it is completely controlled. The media of you is completely controlled from the beginning. So that's the thing. And when you experience something, or, whether you call them angels or devils or ETs or whatever, if they're coming to you and they're saying something that's pro-humanity and pro-Earth, I have high doubts that this has anything to do with some kind of devils that religion talks about, or anti-patriotic ideas, against politics, or So it doesn't have anything to do with that. It is about discernment. If they're coming to you with an idea that helps humanity, then say it. You don't have to say you got it from an extraterrestrial.
Yeah, that's probably not the best place to front, really. Hey, E.T. told me this. But consider, instead of the source of it, consider the idea of it.
Yes, consider the idea of it, knowing that there's a cadre, there is an army of people that will not, that will absolutely control the perception of what you're saying.
I would say there's also an army of people who resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's an army of people out there that will absolutely resonate with what you're saying. And you don't have to be a hero. You don't have to say it's from an extraterrestrial in the main populations.
It may not even be that. It even may be.
It doesn't mean anything anyway. It's about the message.
It is about the message. I agree. And I think it's interesting, as long-time experiencers that you and I both been, that the message that could turn humanity around is probably more welcome now from an outside perspective rather than what we're given from the mainstream, because the mainstream is beginning to look crazier than they tell us we are.
They do. They're told to dress a certain way. They're told to have a certain style. They're told to have a certain status. They're completely manipulated that way into a false sense of capitalism.
Yeah, the pyramid of power, a pyramidic structure. Yeah,
there's the capitalistic idea, and none of it's capitalistic because they've taken away all opportunities.
Yeah, capitalism, or that methodology of economy or economics, is supply and demand, and we're talking about now the supply side of it is getting on lockdown. as all the resources are taken offline for everybody else except for a few people, and they're making an assumption that that's good for somebody somewhere. But I don't think that assumption is good. If you don't have a balance where you have the demand side is not also equally supported, then you don't really have that system anymore. So I don't think they even believe their own press, really.
Right. So, the knowing, getting back to what knowing is, when you get an idea from whatever the source is, it's important to use discernment. That source may not be completely telling the truth either. They may have their own agenda or whatever. So it's good to use discernment to filter some of these ideas. And remember, if it's coming from a different dimension or space, it's probably mirrored. It's probably a mirrored idea.
Could you explain that a little better?
Yes, it's kind of like the Kachina clowns, and they show their tribe. They show the tribe that believes in them these rotten things that people do, in a very clownish style. And the idea of that is reverse
psychology.
Yeah, it's a reverse psychology, hoping that they'll learn from the bad things that they're acting out.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like we need some kind of absurd, example or some. I could say, like, if you just see a UFO, it's not so much that it's absurd, it just sticks out from nowhere. It doesn't fit in the reality construct that you're giving. So even that is instructive. You see something that's not an airplane, there's no tailpipe spewing out, spent fuel, and it doesn't make any kind of sound, and it doesn't fit our paradigm at all.
Well, wait for the message, because if you see a UFO that's that our military doesn't have, or it's from space or something, what is the message? It's going to be telepathic. It's going to be graphic. It's going to be holographic. So what is the message exactly? Because it's really not important to get all excited, and tell people that you've seen a UFO, because now that they exist. But
yeah.
What does that matter?
I think it's interesting. Debunker type people will say that you're a believer when you've seen it with your own eyes. You're a knower at that point.
Yeah, you're not a believer at that point. It's right in front of your face. It's 20 feet away. You can see it. It's a large object. It's three-dimensional. It's in your reality.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not,
Now that's the portal to knowing, because it becomes a doorway of.
It's a doorway.
Learning.
Seeing a UFO is a
Yeah.
doorway. Seeing an alien or an ET in your bedroom or something is a doorway. The message hasn't come yet.
It's the option.
They're testing you.
Right, to see if you're open.
Yeah, will you be open to that message?
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we're running out of time. I want to thank you, Bret, and to tell people to check out portalsofknowing.com. And currently, right now, if you do, you'll see, in about a week or so, we're going to be in Silver City. You'll be able to see that event. And then also on that same website, after the event, we're also going to have kind of a follow-up and a report of what happened, and maybe some videos or audio or something.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about graphic and telepathic communication and extraterrestrial stuff. It'll be great.
Like we talk about it every day.
Pretty much.
Thank you for listening to the Portals of Knowing podcast. Please check out the website portalsofknowing.com for books and media from unique perspectives. Also on portalsofknowing.com, uniquely curated resources have been chosen by the team of Sheppard and Patrick. Cultivate the inner knowing for yourself using the great resources on our website. Thank you to the artist Jazzar for the song Great Dark Spot
from the album Galaxy that can be found on the freemusicarchive.org. This is a production of portalsofknowing.com.